4 students and 4 months. This is our journey as we discover what the real problem with the spaces underneath freeways in San Francisco is. This is URBWAYS Bridging the Gap. Here is how it all first started.
So URBWAYS actually comes from the first part of urban and then freeways. That's the ways part, and together it's URBWAYS. And originally this was the vision that we had for these urban freeways and what we could make of them.
What we think, like before we dive into the research about all these areas under urban freeways, is that they are the areas that are not used by people normally, and people won't necessarily go there unless they need to go through. People perceive it as like an unpleasant place to hang out, and there's so much noise and even homeless people, especially here in San Francisco, and it's always associated with like dirty and hygiene problems.
These kind of spaces that we've been talking about that are specifically beneath urban freeways are kind of a case study in moments of kind of urban design and architecture where people are not really considered. So, you know, in these cases, it's really the car first, and the kind of the way that people interact with that infrastructure and the way that that infrastructure has affected the city was not really taken into account. So it's kind of a question of, you know, what can be done with that after the fact, and then also how can that provide a model for the future.
We quickly realized that this was not going to be easy.
The sound is really deafening here.
To develop a plan for our research and benefit from some urban planning expertise, we met with Blake Weber from Gensler, one of the world's most prominent design and architecture firms.
So one thing I really want you guys to think about as we're walking around the freeway over here today is it's not only important to look at the physical structure of the freeway, whether the size, the height, what's underneath it, what materials there, but it's also when you guys are designing something to go underneath there, thinking about how it fits back into the city, you need to look at the surrounding context.
There are a number of restrictions that these spaces create. You know, sound being one of them, pollution being another one, you know, lack of kind of visibility and security.
One thing we noticed, like just like when we arrived here, is like here, down here, it's like super loud. Like the sound is really deafening. Like it's like it's just impossible to be there. But if we go further up, you know, where there's like also public parking and stuff like that already, the sound is about better. So the sound situation down there is a lot better.
I think that when you think about programming and what these types of spaces could be, you kind of inherently have to take that sound into account as an environmental factor. So ideally, you pick a program that doesn't have those requirements. One of the things that we talked about was concerts, things like that you could have create some difficulty, right? So maybe that's not the right use.
How are you going to build something or entice somebody to spend the 5 minutes to walk all the way from there to here to whatever you end up deciding to do there? So let's say you want to attract somebody to this space in here, right here. You have to think about how they're going to get there. Let's say they're stopping at this bus stop. They're going to be walking down this street, walking, and then they come to the freeway. This is the wonderful thing about having these new digital tools, is let's say you already have the scale of us here, and it's the perspective, the accurate measurement is going to be a little different because it's photo perspective and it's distorted. But this is how you can be like, all right, here's the section of our freeway here.
I know that this freeway is this long. I know that this one is this long here. I know that this one is this long here. And then I know this one is this tall, this one's taller, this one's here. So if you turn off the background layer, you have your section. And it's accurate because it's all based off the plan.
I think that one of the biggest challenges is that freeways are designed in a way that they divide communities. When we design these urban freeways, they need to be a lot more human-centered and considered all the wellness perspectives or the psychology of people and making them connected when they are there.
First of all, the problem with these spaces are, since they're inaccessible and are not active, they harbor criminal activities, homeless people start making them their homes, and because of this drug abuse starts, and like they're becoming inaccessible to the city's population. So therefore we need to go about this problem in a way that can foster such an environment where the community can get involved and activate these places, which would in turn play a nice part in the cityscape itself and the civil infrastructure that upholds cities like San Francisco and other major cities.
Our analysis of the space with Blake gave us an understanding of its physical properties as well as an introduction to the neighborhood around it. To further our understanding of the area, we went on to conduct interviews with some of its frequent users.
I work here. Yeah.
How often do you come here to the space?
Daily.
Do you feel at all bothered by it being right under the highway?
No. We work here almost 30 years. Yeah, so no, it's okay.
It doesn't bother me. It's shelter for a lot of the homeless people, but that's also increased car break-ins everywhere. So there's a lot of people that park for work, definitely, and walk further in because it's cheaper out here.
Do you think that this space could be used better in some other way?
I think so, yeah.
For example, do you have any ideas?
No idea.
I don't know what else would go underneath of a highway as well, even parks. Maybe parking structures than just parking lots so you can fit more in here, but there needs to be some sort of parking opportunity. So
one thing that we thought in the beginning was that, using these spaces for parking lots, for example, is not a very good use. But what we realized was that in certain cases, that could actually be the perfect or ideal use for that space. And so not necessarily deeming one existing solution that is already there now as bad or not appropriate, but rather actually looking at, okay, this is maybe one part of the solution, what else can we do there?
In general, in the way we design things, that's the core principle, that if you just react to one single problem that you fell in love with, then you might leave many other problems untouched, and you're actually not solving the long-term problem, but maybe you're solving the immediate problem at that moment.
Our mistake was that at first we were jumping directly into solutions. We were looking on Tumblr, social media, famous sites to see how this type of spaces could be activated. But when starting to do further research, documenting ourselves what the theory of edges mean, what was the real problem, and also starting to go on the field, we understood that the problem is so much more complex than we imagined at first. That's why we got to the idea of developing a framework as we learn about these spaces, a framework that will document how we learn about the multiple levels of analysis of this problem, starting from the physical space, the neighborhood in which these spaces are situated, and also putting that in the context of the city. So we didn't look specifically only, oh, this space is big, this space is small, we can do this, we can do that, we can put a movable object here or something like that. No, we zoomed out from the space to the larger context, so we have a deeper understanding of the problem.
We continued our exploration by walking around to other spaces under urban freeways to look at other contexts and compare that to the context of the space that we were mainly focusing on. And we found a lot of interesting points in terms of like who actually went there, who lives in the area, what other like companies are there, and like the physical space too. Like they're very, very different. And that really helped us emphasize the importance of making the solution that we came up with something very flexible, something that we could use in all these very, very diverse places.
For the second field visit, we decided to go to an urban freeway with a more dynamic usage of the space beneath it. People come here to play basketball and beach volleyball. And here are some interesting points we came across.
So it's actually the only sand volleyball court in San Francisco. So there's actually no other place that we can play. So this court gets really busy because it's the only place in the entire city of San Francisco.
So usually the four of us, we have like a regular group that comes out at 7 a.m. every Thursday morning. I think most of us work in this area, so it's easy to come by on your way to work.
There's a couple pieces. So one, we get to play when it's raining, which is nice. It's also, it's not super bright in your eyes, so you can play without sunglasses. It also keeps the wind more even. The noise sometimes in the mornings when traffic is busy is a little loud, so it's hard to hear each other on the court. But overall, we're pretty much just happy to have a beach volleyball court in the city.
Why this space?
You know, it's outdoors. It's when it's nice out. It's close to where I work. There are a good amount of like outdoor ball courts, but this one's pretty close. So one kind of weird thing is the only court you can play on when it's raining is that one over there because it's completely covered by the freeway.
Oh.
So there's been a couple times when I've been out here and it started to rain and we finished up the game on that half court.
My friends live by here, so they invite me over here and I come, for the cardio.
Do you ever feel bothered by being under the freeway at all? Or?
It doesn't really bug us when you're playing, you really don't focus on that.
If you are changing something about noise, then you have to look at how that's going to affect pollution, how that's going to affect visual aesthetic concerns, because everything's so interconnected in this freeway system. A couple key considerations or things to look at in terms of future freeways or work, whether in this context for urban, health concern is a big one, especially in urban spaces. There's a lot of concerns with asthma, with particulate matter getting into your bloodstream and system, a lot of issues with child development in the elderly as well.
To gain a more distinct perspective, we explored a skate park underneath the freeway as our third site. As we walked towards our site, we came across a dilapidated wreck of homeless camps and litter that raised the question of safety for the people who use the skate park itself. Surprisingly, some of the skaters we interviewed said that the homeless people are their friends and they regularly tease them.
It's not even that noisy, because it's the noise of the skateboards,
One of the key takeaways for our team was the difference between perspective getting and perspective taking. In the beginning, we were taking perspective and trying to put ourselves in the shoes of the citizens of San Francisco and think about ways in which they would want to use these spaces underneath freeways. The difference came into play when we went on the field, when we started interviewing people and looking at the surroundings, the buildings, the companies around, and the dynamics of those spaces. This is how we got perspective. This is how we understood what the real needs of the people are in those neighborhoods. And some of the bad uses that we considered in the beginning were actually proven to be the right uses in that context.
We started off as, in a way, with amateur lens, thinking ambitiously towards bringing in movable homes or movable, like having concerts beneath the freeways, having festivals, food festival, and some art galleries. We came to know that these, we needed more, we needed multiple perspective, and we needed to analyze this problem and break it down into multiple levels, because it's not only the spaces itself, it's the people around, it's the context, it's the physical space, and it's how you perceive the place itself. So it kind of gives an individual experience. So we needed to cater for all of those things so that we could come up with a sustainable solution, or at least understand the whole perspective as one and clear as possible.
In the beginning, we were very focused on finding one specific solution that would work for one particular space. But what we realized was that, that's not actually how freeways work in cities, because they're all very different in terms of context, in terms of constraints, in terms of physical space. The specific solution that we were imagining, whatever that could have been, like an event or some kind of product that we would install under the freeway, that would actually not be appropriate for all places.
Taking into account the feedback from our civic partners at Gensler, as well as the feedback from the interviews that we conducted on site, we decided to create a 4-step framework to conduct a deeper analysis of the spaces underneath freeways.
Step 1. Analyze the physical space. The physical space directly influences what can be done using the area beneath the freeways. And we should measure the width of each freeway and how many lanes it has, also the distance between each freeways. And we can measure it using the measurements on the map, or we can calculate the time we need to walk through the distance we need to measure. Also, we need to take into account the height of the freeways and the noise and the pollution of the space. We should also pay attention to the space we first encounter of the location. For example, how tall is the freeway and what kind of emotion does it arouse? Is it depressing or is it comfortable that you don't even notice the freeways?
Step 2. Look at the neighborhood. First of all, we are looking at what type of income do people in the neighborhood have. Is this an affluent neighborhood or low-income neighborhood? Then, we're looking at the general dynamic of this neighborhood. Is this more of a financial district? Is a work-oriented neighborhood? Or maybe it's just a residential one or an artsy neighborhood? Then, we are looking at the pressing needs of the people in the neighborhood. Are they in need for more security because of homelessness? Are they needing more parking lots? Or what are their needs? And then we put the neighborhood in the context of its surrounding neighborhoods. Maybe one need inside this area is satisfied by a neighborhood that is around it.
Step 3. Analyzing the city. So San Francisco is the tech hub of the world, which makes it distinct from other cities like Berlin and Amsterdam. Moreover, it is not our conventional tourist city. Most of the visitors come here for meetings, for conferences, for participating in different competitions. Plus, since it's expensive, many of the people commute from outer parts of the Bay Area for work. Whereas other cities like Los Angeles, New York, or even Shanghai, these are, although they're mainly tourist attractions, but the people who work there live within the city themselves. So this difference brings up a different context for different cities, which needs to be addressed while going about for a feasible and sustainable solution.
Step 4. Filtering solutions through different levels. So once the space and the two levels of its surrounding context have been analyzed, it's time to go back to the site with our increased understanding of it in its wider setting. This is the step where we'll need to filter solutions through different levels to remind ourselves of the needs and wants at both the neighborhood and city levels, continuously bringing it back to the physical space and taking into account variables like noise, height, pollution, time to pass through, etc. And we do this to understand not just what would make sense to put there to meet the needs of the neighborhoods and the city's inhabitants, but also what would even be feasible to put there in the first place. For example, although the city needs affordable housing and putting it in a certain low-income area might make sense to the people that live in that area and want to stay there, would it really make sense to put it under the freeway if the residents would just get sick from the pollution?
When you guys started this project, you really came in with this almost copy-paste Pinterest approach where you're like, oh, this movable building is so cool and this is the answer and this is what we want to do. We want to have something really tangible, almost tactical, that we have this thing, you can plug it in here, you can change it, and it's completely solved. And while there is strength to having that passion and that really jumping on an idea quickly and building off it, which you guys were able to do well, I think kind of the biggest thing I've seen is this understanding of the context and understanding, okay, you know, how does this specific site, how is that situated within the larger context of this neighborhood, within the larger context of this city, and amongst that, like, how does that fill in or fit in with the economic system, with the social and political system that existing there.
So in this process, it was really nice to see the team step back and be able to think more holistically about the problem, be able to gather data, and then be able to kind of modify their preconceived notions of what the solution might be based upon that data. So it's been a good evolution, and I'd say that independent of kind of the amazingness of the final product or anything that has specifically come out of this project, that to me is the most important thing to see for the team, is that this is a kind of a safe space for experimentation, and that, you know, the team walks away with a better idea of how to approach a design problem in the future.
There's two different lines of thought for that, or not lines of thought, but kind of topics that I think it's valuable for. The first one is for your own for the team's growth and learning, and having this be a rich academic and intellectual exercise for the four of you. And so I think that's part of the value, at least hopefully from my perspective, as partnering with you on this, is having you go through and kind of challenge and change your way of thinking and going across these skills. And then from a urban design perspective, nothing really is in isolation. And so I think having this framework, it just, again, for a student project, really lets you understand how all these pieces, or begin to even understand and talk about the interconnectedness of everything.
My hope is that through this process, the team has understood how to approach a design problem. So it's not about coming back and understanding how to solve this specific, fairly narrow problem about spaces under urban freeways, but it's really about how to approach a design process. So my hope would be that the next time the team approaches a kind of hairy problem or a design problem, that the team has a much better understanding of how to start that process and really goes about kind of collecting data and then synthesizing that data and really thinking out of the box, and is less likely to jump to a final solution so quickly.
And so this concludes our project for now. However, the search for an ideal framework for turning urban freeways into used and livable spaces will surely continue. More than anything, this project has been a rigorous exercise in the design thinking process and inductive reasoning. Initially, we thought that our inductions would lead us to a specific solution tailored to one space, but our reasoning took us one step beyond that to create a framework to facilitate others' inductive reasoning in evaluating these spaces. Our hope is that this will catalyze the process of making these spaces more used and livable. And just maybe, in the future, urban freeways will have been entirely replaced by URBWAYS.